Hello, my name is Marc Winn, and for the past 10 to 15 years, I've dedicated my life to preparing society for the rapid adoption of new technology. My obsession really is about how do we create a world of human thriving beyond our wildest imaginations, and how do we use all of these wonderful tools that are arriving um, to support that aim, and how do we do this without some of the unintended consequences of our actions. So this talk really is called Moving Fast Together, and it's a little kind of journey and a guide in terms of how we can be more human with AI adoption. So the most important thing in any technology adoption or in any change is something that I call the speed of trust. Um, if you don't have trust in your communities and organizations or families or anything, everything slows down. If we see the polarization that's in the world, the breakdown of our institutions, the fact that organizations are becoming more bureaucratic and more slow and unable to adapt and be agile, fundamentally, there is a trust problem. All of the bureaucracy, all of the governance, all of the controls, we're gradually trying to design a world that doesn't require trust to move forward. And we'll end up seeing that this was a cul-de-sac, a wrong way, an error in our kind of way we're trying to create the world. And fundamentally, human beings have this amazing capacity to trust each other, to care about each other, and to do something. And so we need to learn in this transition with all of this incredible technology, all of this stuff around it, how do we trust each other? How do we build trust in our organizations? How do we move from the kind of story of professionalization, which doesn't really work and has everyone wearing masks and things like that, into an era of deep trust with each other for the journey ahead, which may not be easy, which may be challenging and things, but if we care about each other, we can move faster. And so, what are the simple things that we can do within our communities and organizations to build trust? There's a simple game that we use that I was part of building, which is something called the Who cards, which I invite you to go and look, which is a simple game with some deeper questions. And the one thing you're not allowed to do in the game is talk about what you do. Um, and all you do is you can, with strangers or with anybody else, use a simple deck of cards to have a deeper conversation about who you really are. And if we think about what AI means in terms of that context, probably we're so used to having our identity around what we do, and what we do is going to change very quickly because of AI. And so, understanding in an organization or in a community that we are more than what we do, and taking people through an embodied exercise about who they really are and doing that with each other is one of the best ways. It's super simple to actually prepare people to build trust with each other, be more vulnerable to each other, find the interesting human behind the job, and actually just start to actually come together so that everybody cares about each other. Really simple exercise. It's an open source project. Who cars? I invite you to do that as the first step. The second theme that I want to talk about in AI adoption is emotional capacity. We've all got into this habit of getting busier and busier and busier and um, more overwhelmed. I mean, we're dealing with a mental health crisis and anxiety crisis. We are increasingly being driven by marketing, by all of these things, by Instagram, the stories of should to live this kind of existence where we're being moved faster and faster and faster. And we're increasingly in that fight, flight, or freeze response in all sorts of different ways. So, what people typically happening with technology adoption in anything is they're adding another thing onto something which people are usually terrified by, especially if something's new or something they can't do, because you get this egoic trigger response that comes with technology fear. So there are people who are really interested in technology and they don't understand this because they think, oh, this is fun, I with new gadget, new technology. But most people are terrified of something new, and most people are busy and overwhelmed. And so adoption is so you get this top down adoption strand. We're going to do this new strategy, we're going to do this change program, we're going to do this adoption, things like that, and you get this immune system response from the organization that everybody's suddenly triggered. um, and all of these documents and all of these, change programs and everything, they fall over and they're not very successful, because fundamentally we're trying to solve an irrational problem rationally with a rational project plan, and understanding that overwhelmed humans are not rational beings. And so we actually have to build capacity. So you cannot do rapid technology adoption without slowing down, without getting your people well, without building emotional resilience skills, care, community, capacity, all of these kind of things. You have to have a process for thriving within your community, your organization. Otherwise, you're going to get this triggered response, these fear responses, and things like that, which we're talking about. Fear is the elephant in the room with technology adoption, and understanding how to defuse and decode anxiety and fear at the community scale, at the organizational, at the individual scale, and understand, unless you have see your well-being systems that operate within your community organization as the fundamental strategic asset for rapid change, you're not going to be able to do this. If your people are busy and coping today, they're not going to be able to do it. You need people who've got space and are thriving, and they will be able to make the big leaps. This is not about day-to-day productivity. This is about leaps in productivity, and for that you need thriving and well people. This next piece is called The End of the Expert. And here I am as the expert on humanity and AI, and so it's being a bit ironic. But ultimately, I've used an AI to help me do this presentation in the last 20 or 30 minutes. And so the point is, um, we have this emerging godlike intelligence available to everyone. And so many people are using external consultants, or thinking everybody's the expert, or needing to bring an expert to actually solve the problem. But actually, we're moving into the realm, but that's not true anymore. You've suddenly got this expert in your pocket, that can answer any question, and you don't feel silly or stupid or anything like that, because it doesn't judge you. Uh, and you can suddenly be the 5-year-old that asks the dumb question and don't feel bad about it. And actually, we're living in the era where the person who has the biggest advantage is the one who is most humble, is the most willing to question themselves. And so you have this slight shifting of the hierarchy, where the least skilled people are often the best at using AI. And the people who are at the top of your hierarchy in your community or organizations, who are gain their identity from being the expert or the person who knows everything, are the ones that find it hardest to challenge what they do, because their identity is so much associated with what they do and their expertise and the fact that they're clever. And in some ways, you've got to actually say, how can you be the idiot in the room here? How can you all be humble enough to ask the obvious questions and things like that? And so AI adoption and humility are really important attributes. And so you think about, in your community or in your organization, the type of leaders that do well pre-AI are going to be quite different to the type of leaders that do well post-AI, because many of the attributes that we need to run successful, caring, humble organizations are quite different to this kind of get things done today attribute organizations. So I invite you to think that the fact that you don't know something anymore, and especially, like, for me, often, with coaching and mentoring people, when I'm working with male leaders, often an act of pulling down and breaking apart. When I'm working with women leaders in particular, it's an action of building up and doubt and self-confidence issues and things like that. And the issue is it's always easier to build up than it is to break down. And uh, coaching people to use these tools and say, you don't need to know the knowledge anymore. You don't necessarily need to have the skills anymore. You just need to care. And so caring leaders that are humble and that are able to leverage these tools and skills, have the best skills, not necessarily who knows the most, who's got the longest track record and all the things. So everything is kind of changing around this simple thing on the ending of the power of expertise and experience. and the move towards care. The next section is what I call support on tap. Um, and I invite people to think like a billionaire. And it's like, how does a billionaire solve problems today? Um, and then thinking about all of that possibility gets democratized tomorrow. And so, um, if you think about it, they often have a personal assistant that um, is organizing everything for them and then can create this kind of magic carpet ride and things like that. We're just moving to the period where they have someone to write everything they need, they have something to do everything they need, and actually the power of them is the kind of limitless nature to how they think that I want to do this, and I'm willing to pull in all of the support I need to actually make that happen. Right now we can get someone get we can use AI. Is like having a ghostwriter. It's like having a marketing assistant. It's like having all of these people that can help you deliver something. And it's just the first stage of that. The next stage will be intelligent agents, where we can get all of these things to take action on our behalf rather than just creating things. And then when we're talking about moving to the next stage of humanoid robots, we now got a humanoid form that can do any skill and any action on our behalf. And so it's really getting out of the mindset of being the doer and the struggler and the sufferer and not having the resources to operate in an era of how do you do this with an era of in the era of abundance when you've got support on tap. The next section is frictionless action. Um, and we think at the moment, many of us are in large kind of bureaucratic organizations, and we think about how much bureaucracy there is to get anything done. Or I need money for this, or um, I need permission for this. I need to get this skill, this people, this thing, and actually getting things done in this world is quite a hard challenge. But what we may have noticed if we've used LLMs and ChatGPT and things like that is that suddenly something that was hard to get done is now easy to get done. And so the friction from imagination to action is disappearing in some areas. And so we think about that scaling into it's just in certain areas right now. But if we think about, and this for activists and Imagineers is a really interesting thing to actually deal with, because you're used to having all of these ideas and all of this imagination, but actually making those ideas happen, there's always been a barrier and always friction. What we're going to see over the next 10 years is that friction between imagination and action dissolving, and we've understood that from ChatGPT. But when we have, you know, robots that can build pyramids and and all of this kind of human creativity and wonder and 3D printing and intelligence and energy and things moving to free, that the gap between imagination and action is going to dissolve. And so the huge advantage is going to be to the Imagineer, um, and the disadvantage is going to be potentially to the people who don't have the imagination, is because beauty is going to become very cheap. And so we're about to, I like to say, move into global festival mode. We may have a rocky transition, but the fact that all of our imagination can be brought to life, and that friction is something that's going to, I'm really radically hopeful about. And as creatives, I hope you understand that this ease and wonder and this ability for you to take your creative ideas and make them real is going to get very easy over the next decade. The next piece is about first principles thinking, and seeing the world through a child's eyes. Um, and so, one of the biggest barriers in the coming time is, and this is in all systems, be it education, be it healthcare, be it, it's always been done this way. This is the way it's done. Um, and for a lot of creative people and things like that, that's always seemed like challenging today, but that's going to get even more challenging, as the possibility in all areas of life means that we're going to be able to do things to a much higher level with a fraction of the effort in a very different way. And so we really need to see the world through a child's eyes, in many ways, and get into first principles thinking and say, how do we solve this particular problem that we care about without thinking necessarily about how it was done in the past, but maybe considering the timeless wisdom of the problem. But how do we use these incredible tools to actually solve the problems that we care about and free ourselves from the way that these problems are currently solved today, and get into that mindset of first principles thinking, being childlike, being able to say, why is things this way, and actually being able to build the solutions from that place rather than worrying too much necessarily about how things are being done today, and recognizing that many of the things that are being done in certain ways today are unsustainable and will collapse, and won't be able to sustain themselves, whether not being able to get the people to do it, not being able to afford to do it the old way. All of these types of things are coming under pressure anyway. We can feel this all around us. But the challenge isn't necessarily to go into necessarily fighting the old and all of that kind of stuff. It's starting to actually understand all of this wave of possibility is arriving. And it's like building wonder in the ruins of the old things as they start to collapse, and putting all of your energy and time and effort into building the new thing from first principles in a beautiful and creative way to really inspire people to move into the new world. This next piece is, I think, one of the biggest challenges for people. If we think about every boardroom in 2019, you can pretty much say that it was a waste of time. Everybody's 5-year plans, all the effort that people had into having a map for the future was a waste, because 2020 was nothing like 2019. And so for the leaders within this kind of community, and leaders of organizations and leaders of communities, or want to, we're moving into a strange era where the illusion of control is not obvious. And ironically, all the 2021 board meetings essentially went back to the old process, which is we'll start doing the 5-year plan again. We'll start trying to control the future, and we'll start actually, oh, maybe if we can get all the variables down to something we control, we can then move forward. Well, here's the story. It's going to get more chaotic, and all of the plans you're coming are completely pointless. I mean, nobody saw ChatGPT really coming, and all the thing that's broke. I guarantee you, these large action models and all the kind of stuff that's around, robots and stuff, and everything's arriving today. I've got no clue what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, and I'm cool with that. And I'm willing to lead people in my community and say, I don't have a map, but let's explore. Columbus found um, the West Indies when he was on a trip to the East Indies. I mean, ultimately, we're in the era where what matters is our purpose. What is the thing that we're caring about, and the values that we actually apply? And so we need, rather than plans and documents and things like that, we need purposes to guide, a value set in terms of how we're going to get there, and this capacity to have fun and fail and rebuild and keep going, and trust that waves of possibility are going to arrive all the time. We might not know what they are, but ultimately what matters most is the things that we care about. And that um, it's terrifying in many ways to live life without a map. um, it's like riding a wave. For me, you've got two choices. One is to be knocked over by the wave and to be tossed underneath it and all of these kind of things, or to grab the surfboard and to recognize, and that's the kind of planning way of doing things, is because the plan will get ripped up and knocked by the wave. But the real wing is to grab the surfboard, and although it's terrifying, it's also exhilarating, and get into that space of riding the waves of the future as they arrive, recognizing that purpose and values are always the way to navigate, even when you don't know what lies ahead. So, in closing, I want to send you off with a message of limitless possibility. We are moving into the limitless era. And it's often hard from the news we read, and from the information that we get, and from all the challenges that we face and haven't yet seen that we have to face. Um, that humanity is doomed, and it isn't. There are 8 billion incredible humans who care in all sorts of different ways. about things, and they are going to get access to tools of limitless possibility. And so understand that humans plus AI and plus all this wonderful technology with key things like care and kindness and generosity and wonder, these things mixed together in a era of limitless possibility gives us the opportunity to create an incredible world. Um, and within your hearts, there will be something you really care about. And there's a soul, I'm going to leave you with the soul question that I often ask people. If anything was possible and you could only change one thing about the world, what would it be? Trust that you care enough already to solve that particular problem, and the tools and the solutions are arriving all of the time for you to be able to do that. It isn't about skill or knowledge, it's about care. And if that answer to that question in a limitless area, something that you really care about, you can set sail towards that item. It's the question of sharing with the world this is the thing that you care about, and inviting people to go on a journey together to actually solve that particular challenge. Two things is really confess to yourself what you really care about and set sail, tell another human being about it. And the thing that I think that every organization can do today to make that easier is to set up an AI adoption group. Um, Come together once a week, once a month with everybody that's interested today and just talk. Um, that will bring you together. You'll be amazed what ideas and solutions and care already exists within your organization or community. And just showing up with other people that care is the number one step that you can do today. Don't worry about how to change things today. Don't worry about trying to find the answers before you set sail. Just gather in a in the spirit of common purpose and share what you're learning along the way and have fun.